The ruthless woman targets the young man's best friend, mistaking them for a mage. Despite his friend's plea, she declares her judgment and is ready to kill. The young man blames himself for his friend's peril, since he failed to hide them both from the woman's detection. With no other options left, his friend sacrifices himself and attacks the woman, who easily deflects the attack and kills him. The young man watches in despair as she leaves, realizing that the woman must possess a terrifying magical power because of the ultimate treasure she has claimed, the Wedge of Contracts. Mr. Pig talks with Jess about the 3 great treasures of Mestria, ancient relics that nobody knows much about, but are believed to be incredibly valuable. Marcus, the king, seems to be after the Spear of Destruction, which could be useful against the surreptitious sorcerer, a dangerous mage who's a threat to the kingdom. Tomorrow, Mr. Pig and Jess will meet Knot and the Liberation Army to discuss how to reconcile the 2 groups. Jess is nervous, as the fate of the Yesmas, hunted and enslaved mages, depends on their negotiation. Mr. Pig reassures her and wishes for the peaceful moment to last forever. The moonlight shone through the window as the group embarked on a journey on the back of a dragon. Prince Shulavis jokingly teased his companions about their thoughts on Jess's legs, and they discussed their plan to uncover the identity of Knot's dog, Rossi. They arrived in Munires, a safe commercial city, and visited the mansion where the Liberation Army officers stayed. The dragon, created by Marcus, emitted light that matched the color of the sky, making it difficult to spot from below. They were eager to uncover the truth and present their findings to the royal dynasty as their trump card. The group arrived at a grand mansion, greeted by Knot in his luxurious attire. They exchanged pleasantries, and Shulavis handed Knot a leather bag. Rossi, a large dog, appeared next, and Jess requested to speak with him. Shulavis spoke to the dog, revealing that he was actually Rossi's uncle, who had been hiding his identity as a mage from the royal dynasty. Knot was initially shocked and angry, but eventually calmed down and listened to Rossi's story as 3 humans and a pig sat attentively. Hortus, King Marcus's brother, had left the royal dynasty as he couldn't abide by their methods. He'd turned into a dog with an anklet that sealed his magic and had been watching the group for some time. He needed certain things from the capital to change back, so Knot and his companions were tasked with getting them. Jess and Shulavis, accompanied by the clever Pigkun, set out on the mission to find the spring water and sealed history book. First, they headed to the Flower Plaza and then to the mountains beyond the capital. However, the task proved difficult until Pigkun solved the riddle, revealing that the mountains were invisible to those with pure hearts. Jess and the protagonist solve a puzzle that involves finding statues and following clues. Jess struggles to figure out the second clue until the protagonist gives her a hint. They reach a landing and find a statue of a nude young girl with outstretched arms. Jess figures out the third clue, and they proceed up some stairs like wings. They talk about playing a mystery game in the future, and Jess jokingly warns the protagonist not to make the question about her chest size. She asks if the protagonist has seen another woman's breasts, and he awkwardly explains the existence of naughty books with photos. Jess and the protagonist continue their search for the sealed history book, taking in the sights of the capital along the way. They reach a cliff where they collect spring water and admire the view, with the protagonist playfully joking about not wanting to become minced meat cutlet. Jess admits to never wanting to be separated from the protagonist and enjoys their time together. As they head back home, they take in the city's bustling evening life. The protagonist becomes apprehensive about their daily life with Jess possibly ending. The Royal Library was filled with books and a slightly eerie atmosphere. Jess and the protagonist searched for the sealed history book, but the instructions given by their perverted acquaintance were vague. They eventually realized that it was hidden among the naughty books in a dusty shelf. After deciphering the clue of the forbidden twins, they found 2 copies of a book about incestuous love. Jess blushed and denied having read them before, but they were able to find the book they needed. Jess discovers a mysterious black book in the library. When she and the protagonist investigate, the librarian reveals it to be a dangerous copy of the history book that recounts genuine history. Although young Master Hortus had frequently read it, a section of the book has been sealed with magic by Evis, rendering it unreadable. Jess and the protagonist then visit the Liberation Army's base, where they converse with Celes and the Lolicon Black Pig. Sanorn is about to say something when Celes, Not, and Hortus, disguised as Rossi, come out of the mansion. Rossi rushes towards Jess and starts licking her face. Shulavis intervenes, and they give Hortus the items to turn back into a human. Hortus returns naked, and Shulavis reminds him that Jess is his fiancée. Hortus apologizes and gives Jess a shell to communicate with him. They all head back to the mansion, but Shulavis asks for the history book back, which Hortus damaged. Jess is lying in bed and reveals she hasn't slept due to reading the book all night. Jess was engrossed in reading a history book filled with desecration and death. The Dark Ages of Mestria were a time when mages fought with unlimited power, leading to the deaths of masses of people. Shockingly, female mages were targeted for their uteruses, which were believed to hold immense magic power that could grant immortality. This cruelty sickened the protagonist, and they wondered how Vartis was able to defeat these immortal mages. The boy arrived at a dark and narrow room filled with blood, holding a plump man at dagger point. The man revealed the room was used to dismantle Yesmas, and that the one he was looking for was already dead. He later met a white dog and managed to retrieve some remnants 3 days after their encounter. Jess and the protagonist ask Shulavis about a history book in which they believe the key to killing the immortal mage could be concealed. Shulavis informs them that his parents recently discovered the location of the Spear of Destruction, which breaks the magic of immortality. The spear is said to be sealed inside the coffin of the royal dynasty's ancestor, Vartis, and only the rightful successor of his bloodline can break the seal. Shulavis tries twice to break the seal but fails. Then Marcus questions Weiss if Shulavis is his biological son. Before she can answer, Marcus pins Shulavis to the air. Marcus tightens his grip on Shulavis's throat, causing him to groan in pain, and Weiss to collide with an invisible barrier. Marcus questions Shulavis's identity, exuding a fierce and intimidating aura. Jess interjects, but Marcus demands examples of a possible mistake. The protagonist snorts to provoke Marcus, and he drops his hand. Marcus swings his right hand violently at Shulavis, causing him to fall to the floor. Marcus then leaves and commands an investigation. The protagonist checks on Shulavis, who jokes about his exposed underwear. The protagonist asks Weiss to continue deciphering the history book, and she agrees. Later, the protagonist and Jess examine the book, discussing the possibility of the Spear of Destruction already being taken. Jess warns the protagonist about their thoughts, recounting earlier events at the sanctuary. The group muses over the mystery of the Spear of Destruction, wondering who could have retrieved it and whether it has even been taken. Jess discovers a passage in the history book about the Wedge of Contracts, a tool that grants magic power to a person when pierced into their chest. They deduce that Vartis, the strongest mage, used the Wedges of Contracts to undergo Esidessa, a form of mage shedding that allows for extreme level up. The final Wedge of Contracts is planned to be used on the surreptitious sorcerer to remove his immortality magic and render him vulnerable. The group concludes that the sorcerer suppressed his Eastessers to maintain his immortality. With this new information, they believe they have found the answer to their problem. The group seeks out the last remaining Wedge of Contracts to defeat the surreptitious sorcerer. However, they decide to search for it themselves instead of alerting Marcus Sama, as they wish to avoid giving the Liberation Army an advantage. They plan to use the Wedge of Contracts as a bargaining chip to negotiate with the royal dynasty. Jess suggests searching for the Wedge of Contracts in the Cave of Oaths, which is only revealed to royalty before they marry. Shulavis is hesitant to lie to his mother, who is highly intelligent, but they decide to ask Marcus for help instead. They head to Weiss's study, located in the outskirts of the royal palace, to discuss their plan. The group of humans and a pig entered the grand reception room of Marcus's study, welcomed by flashy decorations and dozens of Yesma collars on display. The tired wires asked them to keep it short, but was shocked when they asked for the location of the Cave of Oaths. Wires was hesitant, knowing it was a royal family location, but eventually gave them a small map with a warning to be careful. During their journey, Jess remained silent and angry, still upset at the proposition to marry Shulavis. The pig couldn't help but look at Jess's underwear, but Shulavis scolded him for it. Shulavis praised the protagonist for being quick-witted and handling his mother's questioning well. The two discussed how the protagonist tricked his way into acceptance from the mother figure. Despite Shulavis encouraging the protagonist to consider his own happiness and pursue Jess, the protagonist feels he cannot because of his attachment to his original world and fear of losing Jess's love if he becomes human again. They arrive at the Cave of Oaths, and after searching for biometric authentication, Shulavis finds a trace of magic and opens a secret door. The room is small and lit by old lanterns made of gold and glass. Jess apologizes for getting too emotional earlier, and the two make up. They found themselves in a room surrounded by rock walls, decorated with pastel murals. At the center of the room was an altar and a statue of Vatis, the founding member of the dynasty. Shulavis deduced that the murals depicted the story of Vatis and her consort, Ruta. As they continued their search for the wedges of contracts, they discovered a hidden passage that led to a small chamber. However, their journey was not without its embarrassing moments, as they walked through a narrow passageway filled with erotic murals. Shulavis and Jess were visibly flustered, and even he, the usually composed Shulavis, was not immune to the situation. Despite this, they continued on their quest, determined to find the wedges of contracts. Only the appropriate woman with the royal bloodline should bear children for Vatis Sama's godly blood. Fooling around could threaten the royal family, and Shulavis, who disciplined himself, must remain a virgin as his responsibility. They search for Ruta's eye, but the mural reveals it has been taken. Jess suggests Hortus may have it, having used them to get the history book. Shulavis and the group hurry to find him, wondering if he is searching for the wedge of contracts too. Not and Shulavis confront Jess about Hortus and his suspicious behavior. They discuss the need for cooperation between the Liberation Army and Hortus, but also express their lack of trust in him. They use a shell given by Hortus to contact him and conceal their conversation from Not. Hortus demands to know their location, but they lie and ask where he is. Jess proposes working together towards a common goal. Shulavis and the others are having a conversation with Hortus to find the wedge of contracts. Hortus is being difficult and indecisive, causing frustration among everyone. They ultimately agree to meet up and search for the wedge together. However, Hortus abruptly cuts off communication and leaves them in confusion. They retreat to Not's office to discuss matters. It's revealed Hortus had lied about his location, and they question why he did so. Jess proposes Ruta's eye could help them, but they must find a landmark to pinpoint the wedge's location. An epiphany strikes, and they realize it's the sound that will lead them to their prize. They discovered that the noise they heard came from a nearby waterfall called the Waterfall of Encountering, where Vatis Sama met Ruta. They decided to head there immediately to catch up with Hortus and took the royal dynasty's dragon to get there. Not headed out first, while Jess stayed behind to speak with Celes in the kitchen. Jess apologized for all the trouble she had caused and expressed her empathy towards Celes. Meanwhile, the protagonist reflected on his actions and choices as he left the kitchen feeling uneasy. He knows he's destined to leave someday and fears the sorrow of parting growing any further. He also recognizes he can't make Jess happy and just wishes for her happiness as an otaku. The protagonist feels inadequate and believes he shouldn't resist fate, choosing to leave when the critical moment arrives. He meets Shulavis and Not in the garden, both of whom claim to be virgins for different reasons. Jess and Celes come out to join them, and they all take a dragon to the Waterfall of Encountering. Shulavis has the dragon lower them down, and the protagonist accidentally lifts Jess's skirt. He uses his pig hooves to protect her, and the group lands safely. Shulavis apologizes for the mistake, and they continue their journey. The group searches for Uncle, relying on Pig's sense of smell to navigate towards a waterfall. Behind the curtain of water, they discover a secret entrance to a large stalactite cave, illuminated by eerie blue lights. Not impatiently opens a path through the water, and the group finds Uncle, who appears naked but covers himself with a white cloth. The group continues their search for the wedge of contracts, with Hortis leading his cute nephew on one team and Jess, Virgin Kun, and Not Kun searching together on the other. Amidst the exploration, Not opens up to Jess and advises her to not regret any decisions she makes regarding her engagement to the frizzy-haired man. Mr. Pig intervenes, expressing the importance of keeping the engagement intact for the sake of gaining favour with the royal family. However, Not asserts that everyone has the right to pursue their own happiness, regardless of external obligations. As the search continues, the true nature of Not becomes clearer to Mr. Pig. Not's motivation lies in avenging a lost love. Jess insists on following Mr. Pig's decisions, stating that she believes in him and he always thinks for her happiness. Not questions Mr. Pig's disregard for Celice's feelings, but Not simply believes that as long as everyone does what they want, it's fine. They approach a wall with the same mark as on Vetus's sarcophagus, and Jess touches it, causing them to suddenly appear in a large open space with the wedge of contracts on a pedestal. Jess expresses her trust in Mr. Pig and hopes he will always stay by her side, but also worries that he is distancing himself from her. Tears well up in Jess's eyes as she pleads not to be abandoned. The protagonist reassured Jess that he wanted to be with her forever and that he would not leave her side. Jess was overjoyed and even declared that she would chase him to the ends of the world if he were to ever disappear again. As they both gazed at the wedge of contracts, it shone brightly and reminded them of their pursuit of happiness together. In the sand-filled arena, a wild animal from another world, who was once saved by a girl named Nuris, was now a prisoner. He saw Nuris with the pitiful swordsman and feared for her safety. The old man sitting next to him spoke of a cruel coincidence and how the Yesma would die. The swordsman saved a young boy, but the Yesma stabbed herself, causing the animal to feel powerless. Suddenly, the arena crumbled, and the girl's body was gone. What happened next? Shulavis requested King Marcus to meet someone who could kill the surreptitious sorcerer, causing Marcus to reluctantly agree. While waiting for the person, Marcus sat on his throne with Weiss and Jess by his side. Despite their presence, the protagonist couldn't help but think about the beauty of Weiss and Jess. Suddenly, Shulavis arrived with a large white dog who transformed into a man named Hortis. Hortis is Marcus's brother who has been living as a dog for the past 5 years. He brought with him the wedge of contracts, a valuable treasure. Marcus was surprised, but threatened to kill Hortis for it. Hortis remained calm and showed no fear. Hortis and Marcus discussed the plan to defeat the surreptitious sorcerer, with Hortis offering to use the wedge of contracts to dispel the immortality magic. Marcus agreed to swear peace with the Liberation Army if they succeeded. Meanwhile, Jess and the protagonist discussed the plan to capture the Northern Army's base on the Send-Off Island. Despite the danger, they both wanted to become their respective leaders' strength and assist in the mission. Jess teased the protagonist with magic, and they had a close encounter with her panties. Jess and the protagonist prepare for their upcoming expedition by training in the capital's reinforced magic training grounds. Equipped with anklets that manipulate fire, electricity, and water, they work on upgrading Jess's ability to create fuels and firepower, practicing using different fuels for combat situations. While practicing, Jess creates a dangerous sphere of fuel that the protagonist warns her to dispose of. The two continue their training, experimenting with mixing metal salts into the fuels to increase stickiness and potency. The trio conducted special training, with Jess creating fuel for Mr. Pig to ignite. Although Mr. Pig struggled to keep up, he enjoyed training with Jess. During their break, they discussed their future desires for magic after the war. Jess wanted to turn Mr. Pig back into a human so she could pat his head, a request Mr. Pig found cute. As they continued their training, they were joined by Shulavis, a female officer named Itsuna, and Letis, a Yesma girl. Itsune warned Mr. Pig not to lay a hand on Letis, whom she appeared to be protective of. As they prepared for the Send-Off Island expedition, the fleet was completed and ready to depart. Itsune and Shulavis lead the group towards the ship, with Jess in tow. On board, they are joined by Hortis, Not, Letis, and others. Hortus explains that their objective is to annihilate the Northern Army by luring out the surreptitious sorcerer. It soon questions their plan, stating that their goal is to capture the immortal mage's head. Hortus explains that they need to lure out the surreptitious sorcerer first, and that he believes the Northern Army's territory is where they will find him. Notices of caution from Sanon and Not are met with a solution by the perverted Black Pig and Jess, who suggest that they look for a person who may guide them to victory, assuming she hasn't been turned into a wild boar stew. The Northern Army had burned down the village, and it was believed that Kento had given away their location to the surreptitious sorcerer. Pig and his companions must find Kento, who is being held captive, and look for Nuris, the Yesma, who helped Not escape from the arena. Itsuna is emotionally attached to Litis, who has lost her memories, but they must pray for Kento's freedom, hoping that his emotional bond with Nuris will bring him to them. Despite Jess's awe at the starry sky, they all had to focus on their mission and find Kento. Under the starry sky, Jess and the protagonist shared a moment until something pained his heart and he abruptly left. Nuris prayed for the Liberation Army's success with the aid of Arista that released magic power. Their ship headed towards the send-off island and encountered a barrage of cannonballs. Hortus, the experienced mage, showed off his skills and sent the enemy's attacks back towards them with explosive results. The protagonist learned about the mage's power of Esidessa, where with each experience, the mage's combat power doubled, leading to terrifying results. The prince, having undergone Esidessa 15 times and having the combat power of 16 soldiers, talked about the royal dynasty's incredible power. They possess an authority known as God's blood, passed down from generation to generation, with the founder Vartis having undergone Esidessa 43 times, making his estimated combat power 8 trillion soldiers. The protagonist also figured out that someone was using a smoke trail to signal them, likely Kento. They were then approached by Celes, who informed them about a message from Sanon. The team prepares to meet with Kento-kun, hopeful that he is safe and able to keep their location secret. Celes and Sanon both seem uneasy, but the reliable Hortus leads them undetected to the destination. Along the way, they encounter Not, who appears to be seasick and in distress. As they approach a pine forest, they are greeted by a wild boar, revealing to be Kento in disguise. The pigs are grateful to be reunited with their old companion. Nuris greets Kento and becomes emotional toward the boar. Hortus prompts them to move on to the old man's stronghold while avoiding traps. They initiate their flashy battle plan, led by Hortus and Itsune. The offensive proves unstoppable against the Northern Army. Jess wonders how orgs are created, but Shulavis admits they haven't had time to investigate, since mages and platoons can handle them easily. Meanwhile, Shulavis worries about his mother's health, as she's been drinking magic energy. Jess clarifies that it's a drink that expends magic power, but harmful to the body. A curious incident involving Jess is interrupted by the ongoing battle. Shulavis offers Pig a blue liquid, said to dissolve teeth if consumed by non-mages. After confirming the safety of the area, they investigate the org factories and discover a stomach-turning factory of human bones. Not suddenly collapses, revealing a bruise from surreptitious sorcerer's curse. They suspect he was cursed in the northern arena and try to heal him with difficulty. The curse is spreading fast, and Not may die from it. Hortus, in his human form, examines him. The previous king died from the same curse, and if it continues to spread, Not will surely die. Everyone is in despair when Celes decides to give up her life for Not's sake. Hortus removes her collar, and Celes kisses Not to transfer the curse to herself. Not is saved, but Celes dies in his place. Hortus explains that true love can't be achieved by magic alone. The Wedge of Contracts can save Celes, but they only realize this after her death. Hortus frets over the Wedge of Contracts, unsure of its use. Celes insists that the country is more important than her life. Not finds himself paralyzed by the weight of his decision. Bart angrily takes matters into his own hands and uses the Wedge of Contracts on Celes before the group sets out to battle the Northern Army. The group eventually arrives at the battlefield, where the Northern Army and Coalition Army are locked in combat. The Coalition Army is outnumbered, but fights hard, until Hortus takes charge and attacks the Northern Army from the rear. Hortus unleashed a flurry of explosive bullets at the Orgs, causing chaos among the Northern Army. They headed towards the Org factories to intercept the surreptitious sorcerer, but were ambushed by an Org hiding in the ground. With Not and Sellers at risk, they fought back with all they had. Jess's powerful magic failed to bring down the Org, but with the help of a small fireball from the protagonist, they finally defeated it. However, the sound of the Org's defeat called forth more of them, and it became clear that the surreptitious sorcerer was close by. Shulavis warned them, but there was no time to lose. Enemies surrounded the group from all directions, apart from the few under Hortus's feet who were being trampled. The mysterious sorcerer taunted them, but Jess and the protagonist were ready with a trap of explosives and flames. The Orgs were caught off guard, and despite the sorcerer's attempts to turn the tide, they were subdued. Hortus and the sorcerer faced off, with the latter confident in his immortality. But Hortus had a trump card, a white-hot ball of light. The surreptitious sorcerer was confident in his immortality, but Hortus had a plan. He used an arrow imbued with freezing magic to surprise attack the sorcerer. However, the sorcerer had a countermeasure and fought back with blue flames. The fight continued until Hortus was able to slow down the sorcerer's movements and delay his magic. They were left with the problem of sealing the sorcerer without being cursed. Hortus considered sacrificing himself, but Jess stepped in. Using her power, she completed the seal, while Hortus slowed down the progression of her curse. The seal was successful, but Jess was left with a cursed bruise on her hand. Despite the risk, Jess willingly bore the curse on behalf of the group, and Hortus credited her act of love to be a miracle. The curse is activated by a strong desire to save someone important, but Hortus has no reason to take it over. Virgin Kun realizes he trusted the wrong person. Hortus reveals his ability to take over the curse and admits that if the plan fails, he will be the one to die. Jess is hesitant to let someone from the royal family die for her, but Hortus reminds her not to belittle herself and to fight the curse with all her strength. Jess collapses, and her bruise disappears. Yesma apologizes tearfully to her family, who have caged her. Her father insists that rules must be followed, even if they seem unjust. The daughter argues that Letis, who faces execution, is innocent. Her father contends that Letis should have protected Yesma when responsibility for her was granted. The siblings plead with the jailer in vain, and the next day, their father brings home the bones and collar of Yesma as a somber reminder. When the siblings disappear with the bones, they never return. Hortus interrogates an old man in the heavily guarded prison of a swaying ship. The surreptitious sorcerer, bound and defeated, reveals that he seeks to destroy the royal family due to the mistakes of the ancestor they worship, Vatis. Despite her acts of cruelty, Hortus argues that the past is important, but the future is even more crucial. Not becomes enraged upon learning that Hortus knew about the burning of a Yesma monastery 5 years prior. While the old man successfully fuels the Liberation Army's hatred towards the royal dynasty, Hortus reminds everyone that kindness is what saves a country. Jess and Celes awaken as dawn breaks. In the captain's quarters, Not and Sanon watch over Celes, while Shulavis looks out the window. Jess and the protagonist are there too. Not suddenly hugs Celes, who is confused at first but proud to have come all the way to help him. The crew discusses their loyalty to the kingdom and keeping secrets. Upon arriving at the port, they meet the king, who is furious about the use of the wedge of contracts. He demands that they take responsibility for their actions. The situation turned chaotic as Marcus decided to execute 2 boys for their crime. Shulavis stepped forward to protect them, but he was forcibly silenced by Marcus. In the chaos that followed, Mr. Pig and Jess fell into the sea but managed to survive. Meanwhile, conversations were taking place about trading the Spear of Destruction for the lives of the captured sorcerer and Not. Hortus claimed to have the spear, but his motives for using the wedge of contracts were still unclear. Back on the ship, Shulavis apologized for his father's behavior, but Jess was left feeling embarrassed due to her wet clothing. Inside the captain's quarters, the group discussed the situation with the Spear of Destruction and wondered about Hortus's true intentions. The group considered the possibility of using the Spear of Destruction as a bargaining tool instead of searching for the Wedge of Contracts. Hortus explained that he knew how to acquire the spear, but needed to negotiate with elder brother. It soon doubted that the prince would agree and questioned the safety of Not. Shulavis believed that if they presented a better solution, elder brother would agree. Hortus and Shulavis would be negotiating, and Jess, Virgin Kun, Seles, and Sanon Kun would come along. Nuris and Kento Kun would stay behind. The group boarded a small boat and flew to the capital. Hortus requested that Virgin Kun remain by Jess's side and uncover the greatest secret of Mestria's royal family with their intellect. The journey to the Golden Sanctuary was like a maze, with strange spaces and ancient doors. The sanctuary was made of black stones with detailed golden decorations, where past royalty rested and important ceremonies were held. Inside, Marcus sat majestically on a gold throne, while Not was bound beside him. Hortus refused Marcus's demand for the Spear of Destruction, insisting they talk first. Just as they were about to step outside to cool their heads, Josh and Not launched a surprise attack on Marcus, but it did not have any impact. A deafening explosion followed, blowing away the front wall of the sanctuary and exposing the dark sky. Marcus walked calmly on the now exposed foundation, while the group discovered Seles and the black pig were safe, but the fate of Not was unknown. Marcus interrogated Shulavis for protecting the defiers of his father's judgment. Hortus stopped the magic from strangling Shulavis's neck, but his brother Marcus was angry and created intense balls of light. Hortus and Marcus battled it out while the others escaped, with Not sacrificing himself for the cause. As they retreat, the black pig asks for the Spear of Destruction to appease Marcus's anger. Hortus had known how to retrieve it, but needed to lure Marcus out of the Golden Sanctuary. As they wander through the labyrinth-like city, they hear the sound of crumbling and a woman's voice calls out to Shulavis. Amidst the chaos of a family feud, the Liberation Army trio seeks refuge from Whisa's mother in a guarded cave behind a palace. Meanwhile, Whisa's brother Marcus brutally restrains Hortus and threatens Shulavis and the others. Hortus reveals a shocking truth. Marcus's brother-in-law is his illegitimate daughter's lover. With this knowledge, Jess and the pig race to obtain the Spear of Destruction from Vartus's coffin, which is sealed by the rightful heir to the dynasty, Jess herself. Will they be able to break the seal and save the day? Jess possesses an incredible magic aptitude, leading Evis to acclaim her as potentially the greatest mage since Vartus Sama. Her Exodessa speeds even outmatch the prince's. Her power of prayer is so potent it bends the laws of the world, capable of transporting another world's otaku. All of this thanks to the Vartus lineage, which contains God's blood. Hortus reveals the truth that Jess has the royal family's blood. He couldn't divulge it before, but now they need to retrieve the Spear of Destruction to compensate for using the Wedge of Contracts. Yet, Jess is confused. Hortus had been sniffing at her legs and purportedly planned for her to take out the spear if he were to take Marcus outside the Golden Sanctuary. While Jess touches the sarcophagus to grab the Spear of Destruction and Wedge of Contracts, Not and Seles betray them. They take the weapons and plan to kill Marcus, but Sanon stops Mr. Shitty Virgin from interfering. Jess bleeds from a wasp's sting bullet before comforting Seles. Jess and the protagonist hurry to the palace to stop Not's attack with the stolen Spear of Destruction. However, they soon realize that Not was a diversion, and the true attacker was Josh with his crossbow. The spear was headed straight for King Marcus, but Hortus stepped in to protect him. Hortus's arm is destroyed in the process, and the crystal core of the spear is missing. Hortus gives a message to everyone before succumbing to his injuries. Hortus's smile faded as a sharp light hit his chest, causing him to splatter into a pool of blood and flesh. The rain diluted the gruesome sight at Marcus's feet, leaving Jess crying and the others speechless. Marcus fell to his knees, trying to scoop up his young brother's remains. The tyrannical king was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a lonely and weak man grieving over the loss of someone who loved him. The capital's strong surveillance made it impossible for even Mestria's most skilled mage to rewrite information and save his daughters. All children of the capital become property of the royal dynasty at birth, with parents only allowed to name them and be notified of their deaths. 11 years after his first daughter's death, the man's wife committed suicide in fear and despair. The man, overcome with grief, transformed into a dog and left the capital, where he then met the boy of his destiny 5 years later on a journey with a girl and her pig. At Hortus's funeral, both the royal family and Not attended. The Golden Sanctuary was restored, and Marcus pardoned Not and the Liberation Army. Reforms were underway, and a law was passed to protect Yesmus. Jess and the protagonist take a bath together, and Jess reveals she plans to break off her engagement. As she is actually a member of the royal family, the protagonist suggests marrying Shulavis to protect her identity. Jess confesses her feelings to the protagonist, reaffirming her love for him even though he is just a pig. Jess asks the protagonist to kiss her and prove his feelings, which he hesitantly agrees to. Things get intense and awkward, and Jess gets upset afterwards. However, she then invites him to sleep with her, assuring him she won't do anything inappropriate. They cuddle, and Jess expresses her gratitude for the changes he has brought to their world. Jess reflects on the changes that have been made and vows to never give up. She falls asleep, and the protagonist leaves to investigate something that has been lingering in his mind. He discovers that Hortus had a secret, and it was to protect Jess. Despite his own shortcomings, the protagonist must leave with the knowledge that the bond between their worlds is unstable. He recalls all the adventures he has had with Jess and realizes that those experiences have changed him for the better. Feeling lost and alone, the protagonist found salvation in the form of a princess. For months, he dedicated himself to making his love, Jess, happy, yet he knew it was time to move on, too. Jess had grown strong. She no longer needed him. He needed to find happiness in his own world and not be a burden to those who had helped him. As he climbed the stairs to leave, a clear wind blew through the capital, marking the end of his story and a new beginning. With tears in his eyes, he wished for the world to always be filled with happiness.